All right, the Obi Wan Kenobi show was pretty disappointing. Now it's been a couple months. I figured, no one's really talking about it, and everyone who liked it or claimed that they liked it has probably already forgotten about it. So I want to talk about why I think it was so terrible, and I'm going to talk about four main topics. One is the premise. I think the show was failed just based on essentially the outline before they even filmed anything. Two is the characters and the destruction of existing characters. So pretty much the old and new characters were both bad. Three is the damage that this show has done to lightsabers and how they've turned them essentially into non-weapons. And four is the logistics of this show. The logistics were a nightmare throughout the entire thing, and I can't believe that it made it through all those hands and just no one caught any of it. So there'll be spoilers. If you're here, go ahead and like and subscribe and all that shit. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is the premise. The premise of seeing what Obi-Wan has done pretty much throughout this entire show is insane. And it makes no sense right from the outset, I don't think. The idea of seeing how Obi-Wan spends his time between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope could be interesting, but the fact that they made it 10 years later, which is right in the middle of episode 3 and 4, was a bad move when you want to have Obi-Wan unable to access the Force. And he hasn't used the Force since the Revenge of the Sith is kind of the implication. And supposedly his entire purpose is to protect and train Luke. And he even says in the show that the boy must be trained when he starts showing, like signs of the Force. So if Obi-Wan doesn't know how to use the Force or can't use the Force or whatever, then how's he going to train him? When you compound this with the fact that the entire story of the season is about him interacting with Leia while he's supposed to be in hiding, and Leia's 10 years old, and then them having all these interactions and just never coming up in the original trilogy, is just stupid. I've seen people online trying to cope with this, saying, oh, well, the language was vague, blah, blah, blah. You can't prove that she didn't know who he was. I mean, she only knows him as her dad's friend in the Clone Wars. Just piss off with that shit. So Reva's entire plotline makes no sense. So I'm going to go through it chronologically. Anakin stabs her in the chest as a youngling, which doesn't kill her because they don't kill anybody anymore with lightsabers. She becomes a vicious dark side Force user. No clue how this happens, that she goes from a victim to working for the Empire, but whatever. She knew about Anakin's kids somehow, although literally no one else ever did. Her entire goal is revenge against Vader, which she knows, but Obi-Wan doesn't know, even though he saw the hologram of Palpatine saying, "Rise, Lord Vader." She kidnaps Leia based on this knowledge that she has, inexplicably, who's the daughter of an Imperial senator with no consequences. She gets close to Vader to try to kill him, but it turns out Vader knew the entire time and somehow knew that Reva would be able to lure Obi-Wan out when he couldn't in 10 years. And then he kills her at the last minute, but still doesn't know where Obi-Wan was hiding. And then lets Obi-Wan escape. So we end up right back where we were at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Also, Obi-Wan, who hasn't used the Force in a decade, somehow beats Vader and pretty much makes him look like a bitch, while Vader has been honing his craft for a decade. So the inclusion of Vader in this, I think, was also a really bad decision. Reva, who doesn't reveal that Luke and Leia are Vader's children, goes to kill Luke anyway for spite, even though Vader doesn't know that Luke is his son. So I'm not sure how that would be revenge or who that would be spiteful for other than Owen. So yeah, the entire premise of the Reva-Vader relationship makes literally no sense. If you want the icing on the cake, the Grand Inquisitor knew that she was going to betray him, so we can assume that he lets himself get stabbed in the chest and then acts smug about it when he returns. Like apparently it was his plan to let her stab him with a lightsaber. I mean, I guess it's a good thing she just didn't decide to cut him in half or something. So yeah, the entire plot for the main characters makes literally no sense. Assuming they didn't outline for this dog shit, which who the hell knows based on the effort put into it. Before they even wrote a single word of this script, the show was done based on this premise and these ideas. The story was broken, and nothing they could do would have fixed any of this shit. And as an aside, we can also make Bail Organa incompetent, since his job was to protect Leia, and presumably he has access to the Imperial Army and his own personal army, and maybe even the rebels if you want to say he's already involved with them. So there's another one. The second thing that I want to talk about is how inconsistent all of the characters are and how damaged the pre-existing characters are. Let's start with Obi-Wan since it's his show. I already mentioned how dumb it was that he's still out of touch with the Force after a decade when he's supposed to be training Luke. Like, if Luke had started using the Force at this age, because, presumably a lot of kids do based on the number of younglings in the prequel trilogy, how would he have trained him when he can't use it himself? I think the idea of him leaving Tatooine while the Inquisitors are hunting him is also insane. And he pretty much just abandons his duty. This kind of makes him a piece of shit. Also, the first time that he rescues Leia, because she gets kidnapped 2 times in 4 episodes, he lets her lead him around and just make all the decisions. He was a general in the military. And also, he's a grown man. Who takes directions from a 10-year-old girl? Let alone a 10-year-old girl that you're rescuing. So that whole line is just nonsensical. Also, what kind of rescuer is he, just letting her run off on her own? This makes him kind of incompetent and an asshole. The next episode, when him and Leia use fake names, this is episode 3, to try to avoid the stormtroopers, he's the one who fucks it up. Again, making him completely incompetent after letting her disobey what he said to do and getting a ride from this guy who works for the Empire. The showrunners, I would bet my fucking left nut, didn't watch the Clone Wars, since they clearly didn't watch Return of the Sith, or probably A New Hope. In the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan literally fakes his own death and undergoes surgery to become a bounty hunter for a mission. And this includes tricking Anakin, who's like the person closest to him at the time. And this is the guy who's suddenly incompetent about managing a very basic lie to some stormtroopers. He also let Leia make up the story. So again, not mentoring, not leading. He's just kind of getting dragged around by a 10-year-old that he just rescued. He also let Vader slaughter people in this town, and then he doesn't confront him, but then he also can't get away from him for some reason. Which is kind of like the worst of both. Rescuing Leia the second time, his plan is literally just walk into the Inquisitor base and run out. It's so stupid, it never should have worked. And then the last episode, when he beats Vader, wrongfully I would say, and has Vader at his mercy, he lets him live. So this makes him pretty fucking immoral. Like, he let Anakin go the first time, essentially hoping that he would die, presumably. And at this point, Vader has been murdering people en masse for a decade. Killing who knows how many people, how many Jedis, how many children. Vader literally tells him Anakin is gone, and only Vader is left. So when he has Vader at his mercy for execution, he just lets him go. And then he follows it up by not finishing off Reva on Tatooine. Reva, who was just hunting Luke in his own house, whose duty it was for Obi-Wan to protect. Who was also hunting Obi-Wan, who spent the last 10 years murdering who knows how many people. Again, how many families and kids as an Inquisitor. I mean, she can also reveal Luke and Leia's identities, or just come back later and kill them on her own. And this is the person that Obi-Wan doesn't execute and do his one and only job after letting the most well-known murderer in the galaxy go. So the Obi-Wan show just made him completely incompetent, completely stupid, kind of a coward, and pretty fucking immoral. So I want to talk about Vader next, since obviously he's the second most relevant character, although he's not in it very much. Not nearly as much as the other characters. It's still Darth Vader. I'm not going to go too much into him, because he just didn't have that much time. But I feel like they kind of just made him a brutish idiot as well. Like, he goes to the village just killing people to kill them. And I know he's trying to lure Obi-Wan out, but if he's trying to lure Obi-Wan out, why wouldn't he torture them and make Obi-Wan have to listen to them suffer? So then Obi-Wan really has to make a decision. If he just silently snaps their neck, then Obi-Wan can't stop it anyway. If he's even aware of it. Letting Obi-Wan escape when he's torturing him, and he has a unit of stormtroopers with him, also makes him look incompetent. The trick of letting Leia escape with the tracker, now he's learned that from Reva, which makes him dumber, because he wasn't clever enough to come up with this kind of trick on his own. When he chases them in the base, he rips the ship apart with the Force. Makes no sense he can't do anything similar in episode 4, 5, or 6. Just shitting all over that. He lets Reva try to kill him, and he toys with her instead of just killing her with no mercy, which is how Vader operates. And he's also shown to be pretty incompetent at killing people when he stabs the same person twice in the chest and can't kill her. And he knows that she survived the first time and doesn't finish her off the second time. And then he also appears to be dumber than Reva because he can't find his own kids or Obi-Wan, but she can. And then at the end, when he loses to Obi-Wan, who literally hasn't used the Force or had a lightsaber duel in a decade, it just makes no fucking sense. Like, Vader this entire time has just been hunting down people, taking on missions for the Emperor, being just fucking brutal. And what do we get? We get him losing to fucking Obi-Wan because Obi-Wan has an anime moment of flashbacks when he's under a pile of rubble. It's just bullshit. I'm going to move on to Leia next. I'm going to keep her short because I don't really want to talk about her too much. I mean, she's a kid anyway. But they do this thing where she talks like an adult half the time. Like, psychologically dissecting her cousin and Obi-Wan. And the other half of the time she acts like a child. And she doesn't even act scared after being kidnapped until like the halfway point of the season. They also make her Force resistant when Reva tries to read her mind, but she has no idea what the Force is. And I think she's pretty disrespectful to Obi-Wan throughout the entire season, but then she listens to Tala right away after Obi-Wan saved her. And somehow she has the ability to fix the gates in the Rebel base for their escape when she couldn't even fix her own toy droid in the show. And then obviously she remembers Obi-Wan as her dad's friend and isn't sad when he dies, even though after this traumatic experience, there's no way that she would already have forgotten about him. So I'm just going to leave it at that with Leia. Her character was just kind of... I thought she was way too adult and way too just whatever they needed her to be. And then she gets her little holster for her blaster and stuff that she's going to use later. And it's all just this cheap writing shit that Disney's been doing where they're like, hey, remember that thing that you liked from the originals? Here's a slight nod to it. But yeah, I mean, Leia really... She really carries the Obi-Wan half of the plot. She makes all the fucking decisions. I don't know. I just didn't like really any of her involvement. I don't think she should have been in the show at all. But even though the fact that she was in it, they could have at least made her act like a child. You know, give her some kind of arc. Make her consistent. The next character I want to talk about is Reva, who I already said, her character was just insane. I summed up earlier how ridiculous her plot line was. The whole thing is absurd. Her character knows everything that Vader doesn't know. She lures Obi-Wan out. She's also so brutal that even the other Inquisitors are like, hey, you need to calm down. And then we're supposed to believe that she's redeemable the last like 30 seconds of the show. Her redemption arc, by the way, is she broke into a farmer's house and tried to murder his son for spite, but then she decided not to. How benevolent. She stopped herself in the middle of an evil act, and this is her redemption after 1,000 fucking evil acts. I also want to point out that the show starts off and she tries to kill an innocent bartender. She threatens Owen and his entire family because he happened to be shopping at the market that day. She had a senator's daughter kidnapped. She cut off a woman's hand for complaining. She betrayed her boss, the Grand Inquisitor. She tries to torture a 10-year-old girl about the location of the rebels, which makes no sense. Why would you think that a 10-year-old girl knows where the fucking rebels are? She blames Obi-Wan for not stopping Anakin when he was on Utapau, getting shot down by his own fucking men. And Obi-Wan doesn't even defend himself, by the way, when she does this. Another great moment for his character. She's also supposed to be some kind of genius, but she doesn't even attack Vader while he's ripping a ship apart. She waits until he's done, and then looking at nothing. And then she gets stabbed again in the chest and doesn't die. Then she tries to kill Vader's kid that he doesn't know that he has. None of it makes any fucking sense. When Leia escapes the second kidnapping, she planted the tracker on Leia's little droid, but then didn't act like she knew that Leia was going to escape. Again, makes no fucking sense. Even within that one episode, her acting, I don't know if it was her or the director, but The character was just terrible. It didn't work in any capacity. How did she get promoted this high in the Inquisitors? Being completely unstable and just a fucking violent brute is how they portray her. Who knows? None of it makes any fucking sense. She's a horrible character. And she'll probably get her own show soon. So there you have it. I'm going to leave it there character-wise with a couple of honorable mentions. Luke being chased by Reva, but unaware of the Force or lightsabers in Episode 4. Makes no sense. Bail Organa insisting that Obi-Wan get Leia when he has the resources of a senator, and that's his job. Makes no sense. The Grand Inquisitor letting himself get stabbed in the chest just so he can disappear for the whole season. More nonsense. And a very minor one, but still funny, is Ice Cube's son pretty much tells Obi-Wan to fuck off, and then literally says, alright, I'll help you then. So I'm not going to keep going, but you can see no character in this show made any reasonable decisions. They were completely inconsistent. Even the new characters weren't consistent with themselves. Even if you just look at Obi-Wan and Vader in this show, they're inconsistent with themselves, let alone the larger lore. So yeah, the whole thing was just fucking atrocious to the characters. The next thing that I want to talk about is how destructive this series was to lightsabers in the Star Wars universe, as killing weapons. I'll go ahead and say right now that I think the destruction of the lightsabers probably started with the Phantom Menace. Like, you have Darth Maul get cut in half, fall down to a planet and survive. And the same shit with Palpatine in the sequel trilogy, who is disintegrated into nothing and they brought him back still. But the destruction of the lightsabers in this season was also insane. We start off with the Grand Inquisitor getting stabbed through the chest, who obviously doesn't die. And I see people all the time being like, well, they have two stomachs. As if a hole in your stomach isn't a fucking problem. Like, we have two lungs. Do you think getting stabbed in a lung wouldn't be a fucking issue? Probably lethal. Want to just pull out a kidney? Fuck off with that. Just because you have two of something doesn't mean that part of your body just shuts off like a robot. And the rest of the system is just operating at capacity. Then we get the first Obi-Wan Vader duel where Vader hits Obi-Wan, like his arms and shit. And the saber just kind of makes him flinch and be like, ah, instead of chopping off his arm, which is what it should do. We get the flashback of Reva, who's a child, getting stabbed through the chest by Vader, and she doesn't die. No explanation for that one. Kind of makes Qui-Gon look like a pussy, though. Her explanation is, I just waited it out. Like, what does that even fucking mean? We also get a flashback of Anakin and Obi-Wan, where they're practice dueling with lightsabers. And it's not necessarily a lightsaber issue, but it seems pretty fucking dangerous. I mean, if someone wins, there's a death, I guess. And I know we could be charitable and say that, they're using practice sabers, but they didn't do anything to indicate that. Like, they didn't show one of them getting hit and it bouncing off or anything like that. But possibly the most egregious one of the season is when Darth Vader stabs Reva in the chest at the end of Episode 5. He literally stabs her through the chest and just holds it there. Not to mention, it makes him an idiot, once again, for not beheading her. Like, you already know she survived this once. Just cut her fucking head off. And also, in their little duel beforehand, Vader toys with her without the lightsaber, without his own lightsaber, and he just stops the blade without having one. And they think this is like a really cool move, but what does that actually mean if you look at lightsaber fights? Like, if you can just force stop somebody's lightsaber, then someone like Yoda could literally just never wield one. And he also does this move in the final fight versus Obi-Wan. Like, if you can do this move, why would you not literally just stop the lightsaber with the Force and then stab your enemy in the chest every single time? I mean, I guess that wouldn't kill him either, but still, it would be the move to go to. And we also get Vader getting his helmet cut off with a lightsaber, but somehow he's not dead. Like, his helmet is cut from, like, his mouth all the way to the back of his head. And his head's still there. Not sure how that happened. And the final Reva scene in Episode 6 makes it worse, too. That she was stabbed, left for dead. Should have been dead. But she was stabbed, left for dead. Flies to Tatooine. No clue where she got a ship. and walks around after a stab to the chest, and then fights Owen and Beru, and then chases Luke out into the desert. She didn't even need the back to tank, no healing time. Just gets up and walks it off. And then also, she has a lightsaber and gets held off by Owen with a giant metal stick. So, lightsabers, I guess, are pretty much just toys at this point. And this one season of the show contributed a ton to this. No clue why they thought, hey, it'll surprise everyone if you get stabbed through the chest with a lightsaber, but then they don't die from it. Yeah, it's a surprise because it makes no fucking sense. And this all leads into my last complaint, which is the logistics in this show are just completely neglected to an amazing degree. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here. I'm just going to rattle them all off. The shit that had logistical issues, because I went into more detail in my episode videos. So, obviously we have Leia running from the kidnappers in episode 1. 10-year-old girl outrunning 3 grown men. Insane. Obi-Wan on the roof fighting people. Leia jumps off. He catches her with the Force. The fighting behind Obi-Wan just completely stops. And then he appears on the ground like 20 floors below 2 seconds later. Like by the time Leia sits up from laying on the ground, he's running around the corner to the alley. The tiny gate, for some reason, that they don't walk around at the checkpoint. The stormtroopers looking for and not knowing who Obi-Wan is insane when you have facial recognition technology. The logistics of Obi-Wan running from Vader but never getting away in episode 3. Reva finds the path like 10 minutes after Leia and Tarla does and somehow gets in front of them. If there was one path, how'd they not pass each other? Because Tarla goes back for Obi-Wan. If there were multiple, how did she pick the right one and get to the exit before them? Makes no fucking sense either way. Vader force chokes Obi-Wan and puts him in fire. No one moves. When the fire restarts, because Vader puts it out with the Force, Tarla's blaster shoots it, or shoots something nearby. The fire comes back up, and all of a sudden Vader can't get to Obi-Wan or put out the fire like he just did, or force choke him like he just did. The entire Inquisitor base escape is just lunacy. They have no shields or passcodes to get in. Tarla just walks in, says I have clearance, and they let her in. She punches 2 stormtroopers in the helmet and just knocks them out. Obi-Wan and Leia are in a hallway with enemies on both sides, don't get shot. Water floods the entire floor, but not Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan hides Leia in a trench coat, and they walk side by side with 4 legs out of the base like a fucking cartoon. The whole thing is insane. Reva throws a bomb like half a mile at a ship that's flying away and blows it up. In the Rebel base, the engineer access door is so small that only Leia can fit in it. What the fuck? Why would you have a situation where your engineer can't get to the shit that he needs to fix it? They shoot a heavy cannon at the door to get through for minutes, and then Reva cuts it open with her lightsaber in like 2 seconds. Tarla doesn't throw a grenade until she's about to die, even though she has it the whole time. The troopers don't kill nearly as many people as they should. Obi-Wan is held captive in front of like 40 troopers, and then this is after him and Reva whisper through the door to each other, so he just decides to trust her. And then she sends him off with just 2 troopers so that he can escape, and no one says anything about it. Vader pulls a ship down and just rips it apart when he's never done it before, and it would change space warfare in the Star Wars universe. He also doesn't see the second ship in the same hangar somehow, and doesn't pull that one back down, just lets it fly away. The entire premise of Vader killing a youngling, her living, using her for 10 years, and then killing her again is just nonsense. Reva getting stabbed and somehow getting to a ship that I'm not even sure where she had a ship, and getting to Tatooine in like 0 time. None of it makes sense. Vader chases the rebel ship and makes the Star Destroyer wait instead of pursuing it while he flies his solo TIE down to the planet. So literally he flies his TIE down alone, and the entire ship just waits for him to fight Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan gets buried under like 20 feet of boulders and shit, and then has an anime moment and just throws them off. And then he throws a shitload of boulders at Vader, and instead of Vader getting hurt, the boulders break when they hit him. That's not how rocks work. Obi-Wan cuts off half of his fucking helmet, but not his head. Luke running away from Reva and getting away when she has the Force, also absurd. Reva not dying or being killed with everything that she knows makes zero sense. How does Leia not get captured over and over after this show ends until Obi-Wan comes out of hiding? Or why aren't they interrogating Senator Organa like immediately after this? Who the hell knows? And those aren't even all logistical issues. Those are just from the top of my head what I remember watching the show 2 months ago. So I'm sure there's a million fucking more. So yeah, this show was a nightmare. Ruined pre-existing characters. Ruined the timeline. Every new character was dog shit. Breaks canon. Ruins lightsabers. And this is just the standard that we can expect from now on for Star Wars. I haven't heard a single fucking person mention this show since about a week after it ended. And a week might even be too long. People were literally just happy to see Hayden Christensen and Obi-Wan cast again. And they got shit all over. Hayden Christensen was totally wasted. Ewan McGregor was completely wasted. My expectations were low, and this show was still a fucking disappointment. Star Wars is on life support right now, and my interest has been pushed to like 0. Maybe if they made a Darth Bane series or something, I'd watch it, but I can only imagine they'll fuck that up too. So that's it for me for this one. I'm not sure what I plan on talking about next. Maybe I'll go through the 86 books or, something positive. Because talking about shit that sucks like this is just a downer. So, thanks. See ya.